what does it take to shape that level of alignment with the sales organization? We all know there's a lot of tension that happens a lot of times, misalignments, different goals. There's a lot of issues that surround this, a lot of philosophy, but you've done it successfully. What did it take for you to shape a good alignment with your sales organization?
So it took a lot of different things and it took time. First of all,
Fair.
don't expect it to happen overnight. I think that's unrealistic.
Okay.
It required setting aside baggage from the past, which can be very difficult. And you can only control yourself. You cannot control the other person. So not only
Are
do
we
you
talking
have
about a
to
marriage here? Or are we? No, but no,
I mean,
really,
it's
that's
kind of
what.
like
Yeah.
it in a
Right.
way.
Right.
It requires so I would say all the things that are required in any good relationship, whether it's a marriage, a friendship,
Good point.
parents and kids, whatever. Um, they're really kind of similar things,
Right.
right? So it's setting ego aside, it's listening to understand, not respond. It's a lot of things that are just like good communication principles. Um, I think first of all, so I'll take the example of my most recent um, sales marketing connection because I think that was an example of really working through some of the hard stuff early,
Perfect.
and there were hiccups and frustrations in the beginning, and I think for me, and again I can only speak for myself, um, not being physically in person made that harder.
Of course,
So
I
I
bet.
do think it is harder to forge relationships, deep connections when it's just over screen. You can do it. I think we're getting better at it because we're getting more practice with it, but
It's very
there is
intentional. You have to be very intentional about it.
you
I mean, before we
do.
jumped on here, we had a little, game planning before we hit record, and we were talking about the pool in the backyard that you got going and
Yeah,
whatnot. But
right.
you have to be very mindful, intentional to do that. It doesn't happen around the water cooler, as they say, any longer, right?
Yeah, it's caring personally.
Mm,
And that is another great book. I'm a big reader, so I'll throw out some other books here.
good,
So
please.
Radical Candor
Yeah, yeah, I have that around here
is a
somewhere.
fantastic book, especially for people such as myself. And I'm gonna say, Derek, maybe for you too, because I know you can be very
Radical in my candor.
straightforward, right? But
Yeah,
but
I do.
radical candor works when you care personally, right?
Yeah.
So leading with empathy, leading with your heart, like genuinely caring for a person and letting them know that you can say hard things to someone when they know that you care about them. And so I think that's where there's just a lot of distrust that exists between marketing and sales. Um,
So what steps
marketing,
did you take when you think about
yeah.
being patient, it doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
and establishing that level of personal connection with your counterpart? What what steps, if I'm taking notes right now, what were the first two or three things that I would do in that regard?
Meet every day.
Okay.
And maybe that's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but I
Right.
would have a face-to-face call I'd suggest in the morning. If you
Morning
can fit that
stand-ups,
in.
and let's
Yeah,
yeah,
a
yeah.
morning
Coffee
stand-up,
together, whatever
exactly.
you want to call
Yep.
it. Yeah.
A little huddle, and you can just what are the pressing issues of the day? Anything. It just gives you that opportunity to interact, bounce ideas around, complain about something that's going on if you need
Right.
to
Right.
vent. And that's how you build relationship time, like spending time together.
Love it.
I also recommend that you have shared metrics. You should be
Talk about
measured
that.
on the same things.
Well, we know
Um,
that's like always the tension point, right? How many MQLs did we get? Well, how many deals did we close? And
right.
the comp isn't aligned, the KPIs aren't aligned. It's a constant struggle to get that right. How
So you
did you
have to
do that?
share those metrics. Well, you have to clearly define
Hmm,
those all of those different categories, right? You have to have a very clear and mutually agreed upon definition of an MQL, of an SQL, of an opportunity. Customers are easier, right? Because they've signed a contract. But
right,
the others you need to have clear definitions. You have to have clear definitions around where the handoff is and how that exactly happens. This is like very in the weeds stuff that
right.
isn't fun. It's very It's not
Tedious.
it's tedious, and neither
Mhm.
marketing nor sales really wants to do it, but you have to, right? It's like you can't build like this beautiful house and then have a really crappy foundation. Like the beautiful house will crumble right, eventually. And so
The
you have
wiring
to,
doesn't work.
yeah,
That you can. It looks good, but you turn the faucet on and nothing but brown water comes
no,
out.
you
It
don't want
just
that.
yeah.
Exactly. So you have to mutually agree
Mm,
and you have to mutually own. Um, and I would say another way to do that is to mutually present to the board. So one of the things that I did with my counterpart was when when we would do our quarterly board presentation, sales and marketing always presented together. And so I would have met with my counterpart prior. We would have put our slides together. We would have met to kind of talk, okay, who's talking about what, when, where. We'd have the notes. So all of that, that's buy-in. That's mutual buy-in
right.
to what's happening. So I think those are a few really good examples. I also think, um, depending on, whether you're in the same office or you're remote, I do think having sort of periodic offsites or, the opportunity to physically get together and just focus on sales and marketing content, strategy, tactics, I think that also really helps.